Welcome to Word of Their Testimony, a podcast where we tell the stories of real faith lived out in real life. Today's story is very different than anyone would have scripted, so I barely can call it real life. But we're so glad to have Auntie Pat on the podcast today. We call her Auntie Pat. Her full name is Patricia Abrahams. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's good being here.
Good to have you. We're going to go all the way back to 1966. You were 19 years old, living in Jamaica with two very young children.
Yes, I was.
And you had an invitation to come to America with your fiance's family. He had come earlier. Tell me about that.
Well, he came the year before I came here because he came in and he joined the army and he went straight to Vietnam at that time. And I came up the year after and I stayed here and did what I had to do, got a job and send money home for the kids. That was a good thing to do, and I appreciate his family for doing that because a lot of people would not do that. I'm thankful for them and indebted to them for doing that.
Those sound like some hard years when you were here alone as a young woman with your children back with your mom in Jamaica. You for a few years you lived here making money, sending it back for your daughters, and then at 23 you were planning a trip to Canada. And tell me what happened.
I was going up to see my sister. She was here the week before, and I was supposed to go up the following week to see her, to spend a week up there. And so a phone call came in that she was in a car accident, but they didn't tell me what it was. And then later on in the night, I found out that she had died in the car accident. So that shook the life out of me, and I couldn't stop crying. And so I find the easiest way flying up to Canada the same night. And from there, we went to see her at the morgue, and that shook me up more. And so I got back home to the house, and I was in tears. Tears, tears. Even the funeral, I was in tears all the time.
So you were alone here, your fiance was over in Vietnam, your kids were in Jamaica, and now your closest family member passed away, right?
Yes.
You worked really hard to get your own papers and to make it possible for your children to come. Eventually they made it when they were in middle school, right? So it was about 10, 15 years later.
Yes.
Things didn't work out for you and your fiance after he came back from the war. You were raising these two daughters by yourself, holding it together. That you just kind of became immune to the struggle after a while.
You have to, because if you're here, and even if you're going to school and you're still working, you're supposed to give something towards your kid, but you never did, and I didn't ask. I could have taken him to court. I didn't do that. I didn't think that was the right thing to do. If you have kids, you're supposed to look after them. So I struggled, deny myself stuff, and so that they could have.
So they grew up and you provided for them the best you could. And then in 2005, your brother had come up by that point. He had a family, a wife, and 4 daughters. But eventually he passed away after a long fight with cancer, and leaving his wife and 4 daughters. And we have a picture for our listeners of Ed and his wife and four children that I wanted to share with the group. After Ed passed away, about a month later, your brother Junior had surgery.
He had a leaky valve, and so they had operated on it. And when I went to see him in the hospital, he was doing fine, and he got home, and they called me and said like he couldn't breathe or something like that. So I rushed over there, and I saw him laying on the floor, and the EMS people trying to resuscitate him and trying to work on him, but I'd already seen the flat line, so I know he had passed. They took his body down to Brookdale Hospital, and so we all rushed down there, and so they couldn't do anything for him.
As I was learning about your story and hearing this story, I kept thinking about the parallels with the book of Ruth, all these losses, one after another, right? Your brother Ed passed away. A month later, your brother Junior passed away. And then a few years later, Ed's widow, Scythia, came down with cancer as well. And in 2009, she passed away.
But before she had gotten so sick, I usually go there every day and see that, about the kids and help them. But I always even do that when Eddie was alive and she was alive. I go there and I'd clean the house and do everything.
Talked about Scythia's funeral as being a really significant time for you.
Well, because she was always on me. I went to a different church, but I didn't get that feeling of church and you're welcome and thing at that church. And she always telling me, you should come join our church. And I said, okay. So at the service for Scythia, when Brother Allen asked people who wanted to come up, be counted for, my brother and I stand up. And we were the only two that stand up. So that was a reckoning for me that I really have to do something for myself, for my soul, and for helping others and for doing for others. So that was my reckoning.
And so some of our listeners might know Alan Roth, who was our pastor at the time here at Followers of Jesus Mennonite Church in Brooklyn, New York. So he had the funeral and he gave an invitation at the funeral and you went forward. And that's when I first met you. Of course, this is a devastating time for our church with both Ed and Scythia passing away and these 4 young daughters, ages about 16 to 26 or so. And I remember hearing about, well, there's an aunt who cares for the children very much, and she will be a loving presence in their lives. And that was you, Auntie Pat.
Yeah, that was me. That was me. And I'll go there and cook and clean, like I said before, continue my job. Wow. And that was really rewarding for me because I said, Mom wasn't here, Dad wasn't here, but we had good times and good memories. So that helped to ease some of the loss and, the burden that carries with it.
Yeah. I remember you mentioned a number of times about the role of Scripture in your life during all of these losses, these 6 losses that we've been talking about so far.
Yes, because I always sing the 23rd Psalm. I'm always on that song because it has a little bit of everything just to guide you through life, So that was my backbone, standing straight and sturdy and be truthful.
I referenced the similarity in your story with the book of Ruth and Naomi, who lost everything. And I remember there's a verse in the book of Ruth where Naomi says that don't even call her Naomi, call her Mara, because the Lord has been bitter with me. Were you ever tempted to be bitter about all of this?
Sometimes you do. And because, like, I used to take the train back and forth to work. And sometimes somebody will get on the train and just annoy you. Sometimes I try not to say anything, but sometimes I have to say something and it's not very nice. And I said I won't do it again. Remember one day riding home and this guy just looked at me and because he was trying to speak to me and I wouldn't answer, he's telling me to get on a boat and go back home. I just ignore them, so it's tough.
In knowing you personally and watching your life over the last 10 years, I've really noticed the farthest possible from bitterness. You're a gentle, giving person, and I didn't even know most of your story until just we started preparing for this. And I've known you as one that gives and gives and gives. And I find that really amazing that you're actually one that has had loss and loss and loss and loss and loss over the years. And you've gone to Africa on mission trips. You've gone, of course, caring for your nieces, the Abrahams girls. As we wrap up the story, what is one final word that you'd really like our listeners to take away from your story?
Well, we all have a role to play in life, right? And you can't look at it as being bitter, because if you look at it as being bitter, you're going to continue being bitter. So you just have to forgive yourself first and forgive others and like I always said, I count to 10 a lot. You know, if somebody annoys me, I count to 10 a lot, just not to answer the wrong thing. I just want to make sure I answer the right thing. I'll say, I love you and God love you too. So with that, they will calm down, and that helps me to be better towards people, because coming here to America in the 60s at the height of segregation, and you meet upon some of these people, and you walk in the store and everybody is following you and think you're a thief or something. And so I forgive them. That was their job, and
Yeah.
that's what they were taught to do. But I know better than that. I'm not going to step down to their level. So I rise above that and do what I know it's good for me and good for others.
It's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I want to leave our listeners with one final picture. So since Ed and Scythia passed away, and Pat has been aunt slash mother to the girls, two of the girls have now married. One of them, the oldest one, has a child. And so I'll leave you with this final picture as we wrap up today's podcast. Thanks for listening.